32 and verse 11, none of the men who came up from Egypt from 20 years old and above shall see the land of which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because they have not wholly followed me, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, and Joshua, the son of Nun, for they have wholly followed the Lord. So the Lord's anger was aroused against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years until all that generation that had done evil in the sight of the Lord was gone. And we know elsewhere he selected 40 years as 1 year to represent every day the spies were in the land. And so God punished these people for their lack of faith and their disobedience. But he said that I'm going to allow 2 of those spies to go in. I'm going to allow 2 of the people who are over the age of 20 to go in. And it's just Joshua and Caleb. And he says the reason he allowed this is because they wholly followed the Lord. Now, when I was reading that, and I'm sure when you read it, it probably stands out, that they wholly followed the Lord. And that phrase is repeated quite often in referring back to this event and referring to these men. Even many, many years later, when Joshua did enter the land, and as he was going through conquering the land, Caleb comes to him and is pleading for a particular spot of land. And it references how in Joshua 14, Caleb said, "Nevertheless, my brethren who went up with me made the heart of the people melt, but I wholly followed the Lord, my God. So Moses swore on that day, saying, Surely the land where your foot has trodden shall be your inheritance and your children's forever, because you have wholly followed the Lord, my God." Well, that's interesting. Wholly following the Lord. And what's even more interesting is that this is what God wanted from all of them. Do you know what happened to the 10 spies who corrupted the people and poisoning their minds to doubt God and convincing the people they could not take the land? You know what happened to them? All these other 10 from the tribes, they were killed. They died by the plague. Each representative of these tribes, except for Joshua and Caleb. Which tells me that you are either all the way for the Lord or you're not. That there's no in between here, right? That you're either completely serving the Lord or you're not. And there are great consequences to both decisions. And so just for a few minutes, I would like to consider with us, what does that mean? What was Caleb doing that would define him as a person who was wholly following God? And more importantly, how can we do that? Am I all the way with the Lord? Now, we understand you can serve the Lord in a temporary manner. You can serve the Lord in a partial manner. You can refuse to serve the Lord altogether. Or you can take up this business of going all the way, completely serving the Lord. Well, I want that. And I know you do as well. So what characteristics are true of somebody who is completely giving their life to the Lord? Well, we see from this man is, first of all, you have to have courage. That's what made him stand out as he was opposing his peers. Now keep in mind, Caleb, when he was standing up against these 10 and the people who were influenced by them, he was standing up against millions of people. The people of Israel were a large people at this point. They had over 600,000 men of war. So you can imagine just how big this nation was. And yet, it says in Numbers chapter 14, when God was ready to judge these people, that Joshua and Caleb were the ones who were pleading with the people to do the right thing. It says in chapter 14 and verse 6, Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes. They spoke to all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, The land we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. Yet it says in verse 10, and all the congregation said to stone them with stones. Now the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of meeting before all the children of Israel. So how intense was this scene? I mean, it's one thing for us to have disagreements and one thing for us to have different opinions. But I doubt I'll ever see the point where we decide, okay, let's stone Mike for disagreeing with him. I will never see that. You'll see my taillights heading off into the distance if that ever happens. But that would never happen. But that's how intense this scene was. That the people said, let's kill Joshua and Caleb for what they're saying. Well, I don't care who you are, that took guts. It took a lot of guts to stand up against your peers and your community. It took a lot of guts to stand up when so many people were saying otherwise. Put it this way. You can even take a group this size. And if all of us were of one opinion very strongly and only two stood up and opposed it, that would be intimidating. But that's just a group this size. And yet these men they're looking at the eyeballs of millions of people saying we can do this. We can live for our God. We can trust our God who has led us this far. Do you think God is going to put you in situations where you have to have guts? Do you think it's going to happen where God's going to put us in situations where we're going to have some courage to take a stand for Him? I think we understand that is the case. You can look at how He told the apostles when Jesus was here on earth, and He sent them on what's called a limited commission and going just to the house of Israel to prepare them for the kingdom that was about to come through Jesus. He told them in Matthew chapter 10 that they were going to face opposition as they met this limited commission. And He says in verse 16 that as you're preaching, He says in verse 16, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Now think about that. What would you do? What's going to happen when you throw sheep in the midst of wolves? It's slaughter, right? It's hopeless. But He says, look, I'm sending you in the midst of wolves as sheep. Therefore, be wise as serpents and harmless of doves. Now He's saying, look, you've got to be on alert. You know, one thing about a serpent is you will never sneak up on a serpent. That serpent already knows you're there long before you see the serpent. Alert. When He says, look, you've got to be alert. You've got to be on guard. But listen, you've got to be harmless as doves. That you're not a violent people. I'm sending you to teach, but I'm sending you into the flock of wolves. He says in verse 17, beware of men, for they will deliver you up to councils and scourge you in their synagogues. You will be brought before governors and kings for my sake, as a testimony to them and to the Gentiles. So He tells them things to think about. If you keep looking, He says in verse 22, you will be hated by all for my name's sake, but he who endures to the end will be saved. He says in verse 24, a disciple is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for a disciple that he be like his teacher, and a servant like his master. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more will they call those of his household? Therefore do not fear them. For there is nothing covered that will not be revealed, and hidden that will not be known. In other words, Jesus is saying, look, you're going to be hated, but no, they already hate me. And if they hate me for this message, they're certainly going to hate you as you take this message to them. What does Jesus say? Don't hurt anybody. Don't take a message that's going to offend anybody. No. He says you've got to be willing to do this. You've got to be willing to take this rejection in defending the truth. And it's going to it's going to trickle down into your family. In verse 21, brother will deliver up brother to death, and a father his child, and children will rise up against parents and cause them to be put to death. These are situations that's going to divide families. This truth will. Jesus says in verse 34, do not think that I came to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's enemies will be those of his own household. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. He who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he who does not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. He who finds his life will lose it, and he who loses his life for my sake will find it. So he let them know, this message that I'm sending you to teach, it's going to disrupt families because of differences of opinion and beliefs. What do? He tells them in verse 32 and 33, whoever confesses me before men, him I will also confess before my Father who is in heaven. Whoever denies me before men, him I will also deny before my Father who is in heaven. He lets them know that I'm not backing off. Why? Because the truth has to be told, and you're the person who's supposed to do it. And it's going to disrupt your lives. It's going to cause people to reject you unfairly, and it's going to create division in your life. But if you deny me, if you deny this truth, on Judgment Day, I'm going to deny you. I'm going to say, I never knew this person. You see the idea? It's either all the way or it's not anything at all, right? You have to be completely following the Lord. And that's what the apostles had to do, and I'm confident that that's exactly what the Lord wants us to do when it comes to truth. Will you have family who reject you for the truth? Will you have peers in your life who will oppose you because of the truth and the truth of God that you stand for? It's going to happen. It's inevitable. If Jesus could not live in this world without opposition, and nobody treated everyone perfectly except Jesus, he never made a mistake in handling people. He always had the right attitude, the right response, the right motivation. He was perfect. And yet even that perfect person upset a lot of people. But he did it because he was trying to present the truth to save people. And it took a lot of guts to do that. All right? Well, I want to wholly follow the Lord, okay? Well, rule number 1, do what Caleb did. Have some guts. Take a stand. Be willing to endure the consequences of serving God. But wholly following the Lord is not just based on, okay, let's just do this. A whole surge of courage. No, there's purpose behind it. Why was Caleb opposing these people? Because they were wrong. The truth was they could take this nation, and that there was no reason for them to be fearful of the inhabitants of the land. But it took a lot of conviction because that was a real threat. I mean, it's one thing for us to read that there were giants in the land, the descendants of Anak, and how they viewed us. We viewed ourselves like grasshoppers before them, and so did they view us. We were little people compared to them. And their cities were fortified. Man, it's not like you're just going to walk up and just take this city. You've got to overcome these walls, these barriers. And then you got giants to contend with. This was no small challenge. I don't know if we can appreciate the fact that they were up against giants. We don't know what a giant is. I mean, the tallest person in recent history was Robert Wadlow of Illinois. He reached 8'11", and this was, even in his day, he was something to behold. I mean, you can just look at how big he was in comparison to the average person. Tremendous, tremendous height. Now, we understand it was a condition. It's not like he was like Goliath, this champion who was strong and mighty. this man had a lot of health issues, but he was a big, big person. In fact, he's still bigger, taller than the tallest person in modern history. I mean, here was an intimidating man. And I saw this picture of the tallest people, some of the tallest people in the world, and they're assembled there by that bus. And the guy in red is 6'2", that little dude, in comparison to them, 6'2". And he looks like a very short person in comparison to these people. And yet that person in the red coat is taller than most of us. And that's how big these people are. And yet they're still not as big or tall as Wadlow was. But here's what's impressive. Wadlow was still not as big as the giants that came from Anak and the giants that are described in the Bible. When the people took the land of Bashan from King Og and the kings on that side of the Jordan, they were dealing with massive men. These were true giants. The Bible talks about in Deuteronomy 3 and verse 11 that the bed frame or the iron bedstead for Og was 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide. Well, a cubit was 18 inches roughly. So you're looking at a bed frame that was 15 feet long and 6 feet wide to accommodate this man. We don't need anything close to that. We don't have rooms that big. Most of us have a bed frame that big. And this guy, that was what was required for him to lay down. Big man. So when it says that one of the problems they had in taking this land was this reality of giants, that was a real threat. We don't know anybody that big. We've never seen anyone that big. But they were in great number at that time. And so for him to say, we can do this, even though they're big, we can do this, he was right, because God was on their side. And so the point I'm trying to get us to see is that it takes conviction to wholly follow the Lord. We have to be people who do this out of principle, out of firm conviction in the God we serve. And it's not just something we do to impress one another. It's our belief system. We believe in the power of God. And we believe that he is greater than any giant we face in this world. It's a conviction. Our God is very powerful. And he can deliver us from the enemy. In fact, you go to Joshua chapter 15. This is after the people served their time and Joshua and Caleb went into the land. And that new generation went with them. And we know that Caleb eventually asked for his own territory. And it says in Joshua chapter 15, in verses 13 and 14, that Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, he was given a share among the children of Judah according to the commandment of the Lord to Joshua, namely Kirjath Arba, which is Hebron. Arba was the father of Anak. Caleb drove out the 3 sons of Anak from there, Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai, the children of Anak. And they went up there to inhabit that area. So he was right. I mean, many, many years ago when he said we can take these people, God is able to help us. Well, you go back, fast forward 45 years, he was right. As an old man, he did this. He knew God would give them the ability to conquer the nation, or conquer the giants especially. What about you and what about me? Do we have that kind of conviction to not give up and to completely trust our God? You ever find yourself wanting to quit because of trouble in your life? I think it's safe to say we all have moments like that, where we just want to quit. It's just not worth it. We want to escape the problems that come to us because of our relationship to God or how he has called us to live. You can't run. We can't run from problems for one thing, but we can't run from God. That's the thing. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, Paul describes this. He says, look, I had to stand by myself when no one else would stand with me. But God was with me. He says in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 16 through 18, "At my first offense no one stood with me, but all forsook me. May it not be charged against them. But the Lord stood with me and strengthened me, so that the message might be preached fully through me, and that all the Gentiles might hear. Also I was delivered out of the mouth of the lion, and the Lord will deliver me from every evil work and preserve me for his heavenly kingdom. To him be glory forever and ever. Amen." Well, what's the worst thing that can happen to us as people who represent the Lord or who live by his will? And what's the worst thing that can happen to us? I mean, we could have our life taken from us. That'd be terrible. We could have our freedom taken from us. We could be separated from one another or from our family. We could be slandered. But when all these things happen, what can we know? Well, we can know what Paul knew. Though all have forsaken me, God is still by my side. Why? Because I'm by God's side. I haven't left him. We have to have conviction in our God that he is the true God, and he is worthy of our sacrifice, and he's worthy of our devotion. Let me say one last thing real quickly. In being wholly committed to the Lord or following the Lord, it takes commitment. And the reason I say that is because the story of Caleb, as they go into the land of Canaan with that new generation 40 years later, well, when it's the 45th year after that, it says in Joshua chapter 14 that he says he was ready for his land. He says, "Behold, the Lord has," in verse 10 and 11, "kept me alive," as he said, "these 45 years, ever since the Lord spoke this word to Moses while Israel was wandered in the wilderness. And now here I am, this day, 85 years old. As yet I am as strong this day as on the day that Moses sent me. Just as my strength was then, so now is my strength for war, both for going out and for coming in." What's remarkable about that? Well, here he is, an old man. He's 85. And yet he's saying, look, I feel just as strong as I did back then when I spied out the land. And I have just as much conviction in God as I did back then. I'm ready. Give me the challenge of conquering this land. Well, I love that. The reason I love that is because you have a man who is older in life, and yet he's still growing in his commitment. He's still growing in his faith, his relationship. He's still growing in his courage. He wasn't at the point of thinking, well, all my service to the Lord is in the past. I've retired from that. Now it's time to just coast my way through. He didn't think that way. Here is a man who was still growing, who was still maturing in his faith and still drawing closer to the Lord and seeing what more he could do for God. Is that not inspiring? I mean, again, there are great challenges in a body that ages. I don't question that at all. I see some great challenges people go through. But I also see people who have faith. And we have to be people who keep our faith and grow in our faith. It says in Psalm 92 that as this body is going down, the faith is going up for the child of God. In Psalm 92 it says, in verses 12 through 15, "The righteous shall flourish like a palm tree. He shall grow like a cedar in Lebanon. Those who are planted in the house of the Lord shall flourish in the courts of our God. They shall still bear fruit in old age. They shall be fresh and flourishing to declare that the Lord is upright. He is my rock, and there is no unrighteousness in him." I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts that go through your mind when you hear that verse. I have quite a few that go through mine. But one of them is to think of the lady who helped teach my mom many, many years ago in the early 70s. And this woman was a woman who shared the gospel, helped my mom learn the gospel, worked patiently with her. And my mom, of course, obeyed the gospel. But that woman who has now passed on, she lived into her 90s. And even when she lived in that senior living center, she still had a good mind, still stayed fairly active. She was still setting up Bible studies in that senior center. When you went to her apartment, she had the plan of salvation on her door. In other words, she didn't reach the point where think, well, hey, I got Bessie Thomas. I got Bessie Thomas. Remember that time I got Bessie Thomas? No, Bessie was just one more of a person who had the conviction, keep sharing, keep looking, keep working, keep giving, keep honoring God with our faith. That's commendable. I want you to consider this question. When will we no longer strive to glorify God with our whole heart? When does that end? We might read that and think, okay, well, yeah, when I leave this world, that challenge is over. Is it? Will we ever reach the point where we don't want to glorify God entirely and completely with our existence or with our heart? I don't know if that will ever end. I think we should always have that desire to honor Him, but especially while we're here. The Bible says, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. And I believe that is true. Well, you've listened very patiently, and I thank you for that. But I wanted to share these thoughts to try and encourage us and motivate us to walk with God. In your own life, in your own faith, your own heart, are you wholly following the Lord, or is it partial? Is it temporary? Is it reduced? Is it conditional? Is it every once in a while? Or is it all or nothing? And I hope it's all or nothing with you. Could be that you're here and you're not a child of God. We hope that you will wholly follow the Lord by trusting in His blood to save you that we heard about this morning in the Lord's Supper. And if you're ready to come in contact with that blood, you have to believe. You have to learn the truth, but then you have to believe in Jesus as God's Son. Turn away from every sin you know of. Make the great confession, I believe He is God's Son, and then be baptized in water for the remission of sins, and then strive to live a faithful life. If you failed at that, as a Christian, we plead with you to come back to our God who still loves you and who will still take you back as we stand and sing.